When I brought my kids to my parents' house, Mom said, "Your sister's kids eat first, yours wait for scraps." I took my kids and left. Minutes later, they were screaming in despair. I'm Ellie, 34 years old, and I'll never forget walking into my parents' house in Charleston to pick up my kids and hearing my mother say, "Ashley's children eat first, and yours can have what's left." My twins, Noah and Lily, sat hunched in the corner, staring sadly at empty plates while my sister Ashley's kids, Grace and Ben, were going back for thirds. "Better get used to waiting," Ashley told my babies with a cruel smile. "That's just how things work around here." My father looked up from his newspaper and nodded. "They need to understand the natural order of things." I didn't say anything right then. I just collected my children and walked out. But over the next few weeks, what I discovered, and what I did about it, made them scream in absolute desperation. Let me back up and tell you how I reached that breaking point. For 9 years of marriage, I had gradually become my family's personal bank account. I didn't realize how deep I was in until it was way too late. It started innocently enough when I landed my first real job at 18. Mom asked if I could chip in for groceries now and then. Seemed reasonable, right? $20 here, $50 there. Nothing that raised red flags. But as my career in medical device sales took off through college and beyond, so did their emergencies. What I didn't understand back then was that I was being systematically groomed as their financial safety net. When I married James and we were both pulling in solid six-figure salaries, the requests came faster and with bigger price tags. They always arrived wrapped in just enough guilt and just enough real need to make refusing feel heartless. "Ellie, sweetheart, your father needs that root canal," Mom would say, her voice trembling. "Insurance only covers half, and you know how proud he is about accepting help." $1,000 wired that afternoon. "Ellie, Ashley's Jeep broke down and she needs it to get to her shift at the salon," Dad would plead. "She's drowning in bills as it is, being a single mom." $2,500 for repairs, sent without hesitation. "Ellie, the furnace died and winter's coming," they'd explain together, showing me contractor quotes and worried expressions. "We're so sorry to ask, but we're out of options here." $6,000 gone. I paid every single request because I love them. Because helping family felt like the right thing to do. What I didn't track, what I deliberately avoided tracking, was how the amounts kept growing, how my promotions and bonuses seemed to trigger new crises, how their definition of emergency kept expanding. The pattern was insidious. When James and I bought our first house and needed help painting, everyone had conflicts. When I had my appendix removed and needed someone to watch the twins, Ashley was suddenly swamped with appointments. When we wanted to celebrate our 5th anniversary with a weekend away, nobody could babysit. But when they needed money, my phone rang within minutes of them deciding to ask. James tried to point out the imbalance. "Babe, when was the last time anyone in your family offered to help us with anything? Not money, just time, support, anything?" I defended them every time. "Family dynamics are complicated, James. They show love in different ways. Not everyone is demonstrative like your family." What I couldn't see, what James was slowly piecing together, was the bigger, darker picture. The uncomfortable silences when James entered rooms. The subtle comments about cultural differences and whether the twins would fit in at their neighborhood school. The questions about whether I'd thought about how challenging it might be to raise children who looked so different from our side of the family. I missed it all because I was too busy being the responsible daughter, the successful sister who could afford to bail everyone out. The day my world cracked open started ordinarily enough. I had a product launch meeting that ran 2 hours over schedule, so I called Mom to ask if she could keep Noah and Lily until early evening. "Of course, honey," she'd said, which should have been my first warning. Mom rarely volunteered for extended time with my children, though she'd never admit that directly. When I pulled into their driveway on Magnolia Street at 7 p.m., I could hear children's laughter, but something felt off. The sounds were separated, some voices from the dining room, others from what sounded like the back porch. I used my key and let myself in quietly. What I saw made my stomach drop. Ashley's kids, Grace and Ben, sat at the formal dining table like little royalty, with full plates of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Crystal glasses of sweet tea sat beside their plates. Meanwhile, my 7-year-olds were sitting cross-legged on the back porch in October, sharing what looked like crackers and watching their cousins through the glass door. "Oh, Ellie, perfect timing," Mom said, breezing past me with dirty plates. "We just finished up dinner." I took in the scene slowly, deliberately. Ashley lounged in Dad's recliner, scrolling through her phone while her kids demolished their second helpings. Dad sat at the table with his own full plate, not seeming to notice or care that two of his grandchildren were eating scraps outside like stray dogs. The division was crystal clear. Some children were family. Mine were something else. "Noah, Lily, how was your day?" I asked, kneeling down beside them on the porch. "Fine," Noah said in that careful voice he developed, the one that meant he was protecting himself. "Did you have fun with Grace and Ben?" Lily, who at 7 hadn't yet learned to hide her feelings, shook her head. "They played inside. We had to stay out here because Grandma said we were too loud." My throat tightened. "What did everyone have for dinner?" I asked. "Grandma made fried chicken," Grace announced from inside, her voice carrying through the screen door. "It was really yummy." "What did you two eat?" I asked my twins. "Crackers," Noah said matter-of-factly. "Grandma said there wasn't enough dinner for everyone." I looked through the glass door at the kitchen counter where the serving platter still sat, clearly half full of chicken. Enough to feed 4 more people easily. "Actually," I said, standing up and opening the screen door, "let's get you both some real food before we head home." "Oh, Ellie, they're fine," Mom said quickly, her tone sharp. "Children don't need full meals every single time they're here." They said they weren't hungry anyway. But I knew my children. Lily was a bottomless pit who could eat constantly. Noah never turned down a home-cooked meal. They both looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. They looked defeated. "I'm going to make them plates anyway," I said, moving toward the serving platter. "Really, that's not necessary," Ashley said, finally looking up from her phone. "We don't want to dirty more dishes for no reason. They already ate." "They ate crackers while their cousins had fried chicken," I said evenly. "That's not a meal." I served generous portions and watched my children's faces light up, not with joy, but with relief. They'd been genuinely hungry, sitting outside in the cold while everyone else ate their fill inside. As they ate, I tried to piece together what had really happened today. "So, what did everyone do while I was at work?" I asked casually. "Watch TV mostly," Noah said between bites. "Did you play any games?" Grace and Ben exchanged glances before Grace answered. "We played PlayStation upstairs in Grandpa's game room." "That sounds fun." "Did Noah and Lily play too?" The silence that followed was deafening. "The game room is for older kids," Ben finally said, though he was only 9 months older than my twins. "I see. What about outside?" "It was beautiful today." "We played in the backyard for a bit," Ashley said, still not looking up from her screen. "But you know how it is with different groups, different comfort levels." "Different comfort levels." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications I was just beginning to fully understand. "Different comfort levels," I repeated slowly. "What does that mean?" "Oh, you know," Mom jumped in quickly. "Different ages, different energy levels. Some children are naturally more compatible with certain playstyles. But my twins were social butterflies at school. They had friends of every background, every personality type. The only place they became incompatible was here, with their own family." "Well," I said carefully, "I'm sure next time everyone will have more fun playing together." Another heavy silence. "Actually," Ashley said, setting her phone down, "we're pretty busy the next few weekends. Birthday parties, neighborhood barbecues, that kind of thing." "That sounds wonderful." "The twins love parties and barbecues." Dad cleared his throat, a sound I'd learned meant he was about to say something uncomfortable. "Well, some of these events are specific to certain social circles. Long-standing neighborhood traditions." Long-standing neighborhood traditions that apparently didn't include children who looked like mine. "I see," I said, though I was seeing much more clearly than they realized. "And these traditions don't typically welcome families that might not fit the traditional demographic." I asked quietly. Mom's face flushed. "Ellie, it's not like that. It's just that some gatherings are more comfortable for everyone when the family shares similar backgrounds." There it was, gift-wrapped in polite language but unmistakable in meaning. My children, half-black, beautiful, brilliant children, weren't welcome at neighborhood events because of how they looked. And my family wasn't fighting for their inclusion. They were enabling their exclusion. "How long has this been going on?" I asked quietly. "What do you mean?" Ashley asked, but her guilty expression betrayed her. "How long have you been making decisions about what my children can and cannot participate in based on their race?" "Ellie, you're misunderstanding," Dad started. "Am I? Because it sounds like you're telling me that my 7-year-olds should get used to being excluded from family activities because some neighbors might feel uncomfortable around mixed-race children." "We're not excluding them from family activities," Mom protested. "This is about outside events, community things." Community events that you attend with Grace and Ben, but not with Noah and Lily. That's not exclusion? Nobody had an answer for that. I looked at my twins, who were listening to this conversation with the painful attention children give to discussions about their own worth. They were learning in real time that their own family considered them a social liability. Come on, kids. Get your backpacks. We're leaving. Ellie, don't go away angry, Mom pleaded. We can talk about this. Talk about what? About how you think my children deserve different treatment than their cousins. About how you think it's acceptable to teach 7-year-olds that they should expect less because their father is black. The room went silent. Even Grace and Ben stopped eating. We love those kids, Mom said weakly. Do you? I asked. When was the last time you came to one of Lily's dance recitals? When was the last time you asked about Noah's robotics project? When was the last time you called just to talk to them, not to ask me for money? They couldn't answer because we all knew the truth. Their relationship with my children had always been secondary to their relationship with my bank account. This is ridiculous, Ashley said, standing up. You're acting like we're horrible people just because we're being honest about social realities. I'm acting like a mother whose children are being treated as less valuable than their cousins by their own grandparents. Nobody said they were less valuable, Dad tried. You spent 20 minutes explaining why they can't participate in the same activities as Grace and Ben. How is that not treating them as less valuable? I helped my twins gather their things, my hands shaking with controlled rage. Where are you going? Ashley demanded. Home. To people who think my children are worthy of basic human dignity. The drive home was heavy with unspoken pain. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at my twins, both staring out their windows with the contemplative silence of children processing adult cruelty they don't fully understand yet. Finally, Lily spoke. Mama, why can't we go to the barbecues? I'd been dreading this question. Because some people aren't ready to welcome everyone yet, sweetie. Because we look different from Grace and Ben? Noah asked. The directness of his 7-year-old observation hit me like a punch to the chest. He already understood more than I'd realized. Yes, baby. Some people have very small minds about differences. Is it because Daddy is black and you're white? Lily asked. I pulled into our driveway in Mount Pleasant and turned off the engine, considering how much truth to share with children this young. But they'd already heard enough to draw their own conclusions. Yes, that's part of it. Does Daddy know that Grandma and Grandpa think we're different? Noah asked. My heart broke. Daddy knows that some people in the world might treat you differently because of how you look. That's why he and I work so hard to make sure you know how special and valuable and wonderful you are. But Grandma and Grandpa are supposed to think we're special too, Lily said, tears welling in her eyes. Yes, they are. Do they? I sat in the car looking at my beautiful children, who were asking questions no 7-year-old should have to ask, and realized I didn't have a good answer. Because the evidence suggested that my parents saw my children as complications rather than gifts. James was making dinner when we came in. He took one look at my face and immediately knew something significant had happened. Rough afternoon? He asked carefully. We need to talk, I said, nodding toward the kids. But Noah, with the devastating honesty of childhood, walked straight to his father and said, Dad, Grandpa says we can't go to neighborhood parties because people aren't comfortable with mixed kids. James's spatula stopped midway to the pan. His expression cycled through hurt, anger, and something that looked like resigned confirmation of suspicions he'd held for years. Did he say that exactly? James asked quietly. He said they needed to prepare them for reality because the world isn't always inclusive, I explained. And Mom agreed it was about helping them understand how social situations work. James set the spatula down carefully. And your mom went along with this? She said it was about navigating social situations realistically by excluding them from those situations entirely. James knelt down to the twins' eye level. How do you two feel about what they said? Confused, Noah said. We didn't do anything wrong. Mad, Lily added, her little fists clenched. It's not fair. You're both absolutely right, James said, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't do anything wrong and it's not fair. When people treat you unfairly because of how you look, that tells you something important about them, not about you. What does it tell us? Noah asked. It tells you they're not as smart or as loving as they should be. And it tells you that you deserve to be around people who are. After the twins went to bed, James and I had the conversation I'd been avoiding for 9 years. How long have you known? I asked as we sat on the couch with tea neither of us was drinking. James was quiet for a moment. I've suspected for a long time that your family wasn't comfortable with our marriage. But I hoped I was wrong or that it would get better after the twins were born. Why didn't you say anything? because I know how much you love your family. And because I kept thinking maybe if I just proved myself enough, worked hard enough, was successful enough, made enough money, they'd accept me. Accept us. I thought about all the times James had quietly endured awkward family dinners, polite but distant conversations, the subtle way my family never quite included him in their inner circle. James, I said gently, this isn't new, is it? This is just more obvious now that the twins are old enough to notice. Your mother once asked me privately if I was truly prepared to provide for you long term, he said quietly. Your father suggested we wait several years before having children to make sure we were compatible. Ashley asked if I worried about raising mixed children in today's climate. Each revelation felt like a small betrayal I'd been too blind to see. When did she ask you that? At Lily's 4th birthday party. She framed it like she was being thoughtful, like she cared about challenges we might face. I stared at him, realizing how much casual racism he'd absorbed without complaint because he didn't want to force me to choose between him and my family. I should have seen it. You saw what you needed to see to keep your relationship with them intact, James said. There's nothing wrong with that. But now that the twins are old enough to understand what's happening, we have to make different choices. What kind of choices? James took my hand. We have to decide whether we're going to keep exposing our children to people who think they're less worthy of love and inclusion because they're biracial. The answer should have been obvious. But it meant acknowledging that the family I'd been supporting emotionally and financially for years had been systematically devaluing my children. There's something else, I said. Something I need to figure out. What? I pulled out my laptop and opened my banking app. Something I've been avoiding because I prefer not to think too hard about money flowing out of our accounts. I need to understand exactly how much I've been giving them. As the numbers loaded, James looked over my shoulder. We both went silent as the pattern became brutally clear. Ellie, he said finally, this is substantial. The last 3 years showed $49,000 in transfers to various family members, mortgage assistance, car payments, emergency medical bills, home repairs, educational expenses for Ashley's kids, insurance payments. It's gotten bigger as my salary increased, I said, clicking through older records. 5 years ago it was smaller amounts, but more frequent. Going back further revealed the full scope. Ellie, James said quietly, staring at the screen, over 9 years, you've given them nearly $140,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was a college fund for both twins. That was early retirement. That was the beach house we'd talked about. That was financial security we'd sacrificed for people who thought our children should eat crackers while their cousins had fried chicken. They've been living partially on our income, James said, while treating our children like second-class citizens. I closed the laptop and looked at my husband. What do you think we should do? James was quiet for a long moment. I think we need to protect our family. Our real family. What does that look like? It looks like establishing hard boundaries. It looks like prioritizing the people who actually love and respect all 4 of us. And it looks like teaching our twins that they don't have to accept less than they deserve from anyone, including relatives. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. The desperate need to maintain family peace was being replaced by a fiercer need to protect my children from people who saw them as problems to be managed. I think, I said slowly, it's time my family learned what happens when you take the person funding your lifestyle for granted. James smiled, but it was serious. What are you thinking? I'm thinking they're about to discover what their lives look like without my financial support. The next morning, I called in a personal day at work. While James took the twins to school, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began systematically reviewing 9 years of financial decisions I'd never analyzed as a pattern before. The numbers were staggering. Not just the direct transfers, but the loans that were never repaid, the temporary help that became permanent. The increasing frequency of emergencies that somehow always coincided with my promotions or quarterly bonuses. My phone rang around 10 a.m. Mom. Ellie, sweetheart, I've been thinking about yesterday. Maybe we all got off on the wrong foot. Have you? I want you to know that we love you and the twins more than anything. If we said something that seemed hurtful, that wasn't our intention at all. The carefully crafted non-apology hung in the air. Not, we were wrong or we're sorry. Just, if you misunderstood our perfectly reasonable position. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Do you think Noah and Lily are your grandchildren in the same way Grace and Ben are? A pause. Too long of a pause. What kind of question is that? Of course they are. Then why don't you treat them the same way? Ellie, we do treat them the same. If you think otherwise, you're misreading the situation. I made a decision that would prove crucial later. Instead of arguing over the phone, I decided to hear their honest opinions when they thought I wasn't listening. You know what, Mom? You're probably right. I was probably just tired yesterday and reading too much into things. Oh, good, she said, relief flooding her voice. I knew you'd be reasonable. You're always so level-headed. Level-headed. Code for manageable. Code for easy to manipulate. Actually, I said, I was thinking of stopping by later to apologize for overreacting. That would be wonderful, dear. Ashley will be here too. We can clear the air properly. Perfect. I drove to their house around noon, parking down the street instead of in the driveway. I used my key to enter through the back door, moving quietly through the mudroom toward the sound of voices in the kitchen. What I heard made my blood run cold. I can't believe she made such a scene out of nothing, Ashley was saying. Acting like we're monsters because we're realistic about social situations. The twins need to understand how the world works, Dad replied. Better they learn now than get their hopes up constantly. Exactly, Mom agreed. Ellie's always been idealistic about these things. She thinks love conquers everything, but that's simply not realistic with biracial children. The thing is, Ashley continued, Grace and Ben's friends from school were going to be at that barbecue. I can't have them asking uncomfortable questions about why Noah and Lily look nothing like the rest of our family. It puts us in awkward positions socially, Mom said with a sigh. The neighbors already notice and ask questions. What do they say? Ashley asked. Oh, the usual concerns. Whether Ellie knew what she was getting into marrying James. Whether those children will have behavioral issues as they get older. People worry about mixed children having identity problems, being confused about where they belong. My hands were trembling with rage, but I forced myself to keep listening. Well, Dad said, at least we don't have to worry about Ellie staying upset long term. She always comes back when we need her, especially for money matters. She's too soft to hold a grudge. Exactly, Mom agreed. Remember when she was upset about the car loan situation? She got over it in a week and ended up paying for the insurance too. Ellie's our safety net. Ashley laughed. She might sulk for a few days, but she'll be back with her checkbook wide open. Then came the words that would be burned into my memory forever. The thing is, Mom said casually, as if discussing the weather, Ashley's children eat first, and Ellie's wait for scraps. That's just how it has to be with biracial families. The children who look normal get priority in these situations. Right? Ashley agreed. And honestly, the sooner Noah and Lily understand that, the better off they'll be. They were born to get leftovers, socially, within the family, everywhere. It's just reality. They need to learn their place, Dad added matter-of-factly. We're actually doing them a favor by teaching them early, before they get false expectations about how the world will treat them. I stood in that back hallway, listening to my family discuss my children like they were defective products that needed to be hidden from view and managed carefully, not grandchildren to be protected and celebrated, but embarrassments to be minimized and controlled. That's when the last piece of my old self died, and something harder, clearer, and more protective was born. I walked into the kitchen. The conversation stopped like someone had cut a wire. 3 guilty faces turned toward me in perfect synchronization. Ellie, Mom said brightly, her tone completely transforming. You're early. I was just telling Ashley how much we enjoyed having the twins yesterday. The audacity was breathtaking. After listening to them systematically dehumanize my children, she was pretending to be the doting grandmother. Were you? I said flatly. Yes, they're such good children. So well-behaved and polite. I looked between the 3 of them, memorizing their faces, their expressions, the casual way they'd been discussing my children's inferior worth like it was a weather forecast. I came to get Lily's dance bag, I lied smoothly. She forgot it yesterday. Oh, of course. Let me help you find it, Mom offered, bustling around with fake helpfulness. I retrieved Lily's bag from the hall closet and turned back to face them. Actually, I said calmly, I heard your entire conversation just now. The color drained from their faces in unison. What conversation? Mom asked weakly. The one where you explained that biracial children should expect scraps while normal-looking children get priority. Dead silence. The one where you discussed how my children were born to get leftovers. Ashley opened her mouth, then closed it. The one where you agreed that they need to learn their place early, before they get false expectations about being treated equally. Ellie, honey, Dad started carefully, you're taking things out of context. Am I? What context makes it acceptable to say that my 7-year-old children deserve less than their cousins because they're biracial? We never said that, Mom protested. You said it exactly. I heard every single word. I looked at each of them in turn, letting the silence stretch. But what really struck me, I continued, was the part about me being your safety net. Your reliable ATM who always comes back with her checkbook. That's not Ashley began. Isn't it? How much money have I given this family over the past 9 years? They exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direct question. We're family, Dad said. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right. Family does help each other. I paused, letting that sink in. But here's the thing about family, they also love and protect each other's children. They don't teach those children to expect discrimination from their own relatives. I walked toward the door, then turned back. I'm going to give you some time to think about what you just said about my children. About whether you can live with treating Noah and Lily as less worthy than Grace and Ben. About whether your financial comfort is worth more than your grandchildren's emotional well-being. Ellie, wait, Mom called. We'll talk again soon, I said. When you're ready to be honest about whether you actually want my children in your lives, or just my money. Over the next week, I made a series of phone calls that would fundamentally alter my family's comfortable lifestyle. I started with my accountant, whom I'd been meaning to consult about our family's financial planning anyway. I need to understand the full scope of financial support I've been providing to extended family members, I explained. I can definitely analyze that. Do you have records of the transfers? 9 years worth. When she called back 2 days later with her analysis, even I was shocked by the final number. Ellie, you've provided documented financial support totaling $139,000 over 9 years. That's not including informal assistance or gifts that weren't officially recorded. The number was staggering. That was both twins' college funds. That was our retirement cushion. That was the financial security James and I had sacrificed for people who thought our children should eat outside in the cold. What would you recommend to someone in my situation? Financially speaking, immediate cessation of all support. You're subsidizing other adults' lifestyles at the direct expense of your own family's long-term security. And if I wanted to recover some of these funds? That would depend on documentation. Were these gifts or loans? I thought about years of conversations, promises of we'll pay you back when we're on our feet, assurances that it was just temporary help, repeated requests that came with implied repayment agreements. Mixed. Some were explicitly framed as loans. Then you have options. But the bigger question is whether pursuing repayment is worth the emotional toll. She was right. I wasn't interested in chasing money from people who'd shown their true feelings about my family. I was interested in removing their financial incentive to pretend they wanted us around. Next call, a family lawyer recommended by a colleague. I need to understand my legal obligations regarding financial support I've been providing to family members. Are these court-ordered obligations? Elderly parents who need care? No. Voluntary support that's become expected and increasingly demanded. Then you have zero legal obligation to continue. Any money you've given was your choice, and stopping is equally your choice. What if they've structured their entire lives around expecting this support? That's their problem to solve, not yours. You're not required to maintain other adults financially unless there's a specific legal agreement or order. That evening, James and I had another crucial conversation. I want to cut off all financial support, I told him. All of it. Immediately. James nodded slowly. I think that's absolutely right. But are you prepared for the fallout? What kind of fallout? Ellie, you're talking about removing substantial support from people who've come to see it as guaranteed income. They're going to panic. They're going to say and do desperate things to try to maintain their lifestyle. He was right. But I was past caring about their comfort. Let me ask you something, I said. If strangers treated our children the way my family treats them, what would you want me to do? Cut contact immediately. Without hesitation. Then why should relatives get different treatment just because we share DNA? They shouldn't. The next morning, I began the systematic dismantling of my family's financial safety net. First, I called the mortgage company where I was listed as a co-borrower on my parents' refinance loan. I need to understand my options for removing myself from this mortgage. You'd need the other borrowers to qualify for refinancing without your income, or the loan would need to be paid off entirely. And if they can't qualify on their own, then they typically need to sell the property to pay off the remaining balance or find another qualified co-borrower. How long does the refinancing process usually take? 60 to 90 days, depending on their financial situation and credit score. Perfect. That gave them time to understand the reality of their situation without my support. Next, I canceled all automatic transfers from my accounts to theirs, the mortgage assistance payment, the emergency fund contributions, the insurance payments. All of it stopped immediately. I called Ashley's auto lender where I'd co-signed her loan. I want to ensure that no refinancing or additional credit can be extended on this vehicle without my explicit written consent. We can add that notation to your account immediately. By afternoon, I'd systematically removed myself from their financial ecosystem while giving them enough time to understand what was happening and make alternative arrangements. Then I waited. The first call came that evening. Dad. Ellie, sweetheart, there seems to be some kind of banking error. Our mortgage assistance didn't transfer this month. There's no error, Dad. Silence. What do you mean? I mean, I canceled the automatic transfer. More silence. Then can you elaborate on why you would do that? Because I'm no longer comfortable subsidizing people who think my children deserve less than their cousins. Ellie, if this is about that conversation you think you overheard, Dad, I heard exactly what I heard. Mom said biracial children should expect scraps while normal-looking children get priority. You agreed that my kids need to learn their place. There's no misunderstanding there. Heavy silence on the other end. We can discuss this, he said finally. Work something out reasonably. What's to discuss? Either you think my children are worthy of the same love and respect as Grace and Ben, or you don't. Of course we do. Then prove it. Start treating them that way. Stop making excuses for excluding them from family activities. Stop teaching them to expect less from life because they're biracial. Ellie, you're being unreasonable. I'm being a mother. The mortgage help stops. The emergency fund stops. All of it stops until you figure out how to be proper grandparents to all your grandchildren. I ended the call before he could argue further. 20 minutes later, Ashley called. Ellie, what the hell is going on? Dad called me freaking out about the mortgage. I canceled my financial support. You can't do that. They depend on that money. I depend on my car payment. Then you all shouldn't have spent an hour discussing how my children are social liabilities who need to learn their place. That's not what we said. It's exactly what you said. I recorded every word, Ashley. Every single word. Her voice turned pleading. Look, maybe we could have phrased things better, but you can't destroy Mom and Dad's financial security over a misunderstanding. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply stopping my subsidization of people who think my husband was a mistake and my children are problems to be managed. We never said that. You said my children were born to get leftovers. You said normal-looking children get priority. You said they need to learn their place. Which part am I misremembering? Silence. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You have 90 days to figure out how to live on your actual incomes. No more mortgage help. No more car payments. No more emergency loans. If you can convince me that you genuinely want my children in your lives, not my money, but my children, then maybe we can rebuild a relationship. Ellie, please. We can work this out. Can we? Because I've been trying to work things out for 9 years, and my children are still sitting outside in the cold while their cousins eat fried chicken at the table. I hung up. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in watching people reveal their true priorities when their comfort was threatened. Mom called crying, explaining how they'd structured their entire budget around my assistance and couldn't possibly manage without it. We'll lose the house, Ellie. Is that what you want? Your parents homeless? What I want is for you to treat my children like the grandchildren they are, instead of social embarrassments. We do treat them well. You made them eat crackers on the back porch in October while their cousins had fried chicken inside. That's not treating them well. When I suggested they might need to downsize to a home they could actually afford on their retirement income, she accused me of being vindictive and cruel. You're punishing us for being honest about reality. No, I'm protecting my children from people who think honesty means teaching 7-year-olds to accept racism as normal. Ashley called multiple times, alternating between rage and desperation. Her car payment was $395 monthly, which represented nearly a quarter of her part-time salon income. You're going to ruin my credit score, she screamed. How am I supposed to get to work? The same way millions of people do. Figure it out. Buy a cheaper car. Take the bus. Carpool. It's not my responsibility to ensure you have a luxury vehicle. It's a Jeep Cherokee, not a Range Rover. Then it should be easy to replace with something you can actually afford on your salary. Dad tried a different approach, showing up at my house unannounced on a Saturday morning. Ellie, we need to talk about this like reasonable adults. I'm happy to talk about when you plan to start treating my children with the same consideration you show Ashley's. We do treat them the same. Dad, you literally said they need to learn their place because they're biracial. That's not equal treatment. He struggled for an answer, and I realized he couldn't explain it in any way that didn't sound racist, because it was racist. Look, he said finally, maybe we've been insensitive, but destroying our financial stability isn't the answer. I'm not destroying anything. I'm stopping my participation in funding people who don't respect my family. We do respect your family. Show me. Invite Noah and Lily to everything you invite Grace and Ben to. Stop making excuses about social situations. Treat them like the beloved grandchildren they deserve to be, instead of problems to be managed. And if we do that, the financial support comes back? The fact that his first concern was money told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. Dad, if you genuinely change how you treat my children, if you start acting like a grandfather who loves and values them, then we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But the days of me paying people to tolerate my family are over. By week 4, the desperation was setting in hard. My parents had put their house on the market. Ashley had picked up a second job at Target and was frantically searching for a cheaper apartment. The comfortable lifestyle I'd been unknowingly subsidizing was crumbling. That's when they decided to try a different strategy. Mom called with what she clearly thought was a reasonable compromise. Ellie, we've been thinking. What if we set up regular family dinners where everyone is treated equally? Every Sunday, all the grandchildren come over, same activities for everyone, same meals for everyone. It sounded promising until she continued. And maybe while we're rebuilding trust, you could at least help with essential expenses. Just the mortgage, so we don't lose the house while we're working on our relationship. There it was. The performance of change in exchange for continued financial support. Mom, here's what I've learned over these past few weeks. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. You showed me that you think my children deserve less than their cousins. Everything since then has been you trying to minimize that reality so you can keep my money. That's not true, isn't it? You're not calling because you miss Noah and Lily. You're calling because you miss my financial contributions. We miss all of you. Then prove it. Spend time with my children without asking for money. Show genuine interest in their lives without trying to negotiate financial support. Act like grandparents who love them, not people who tolerate them for profit. Ellie, please, I'm done with this conversation. When you're ready to be honest about what you actually want, we can talk again. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence from my family, broken only by occasional texts from Ashley complaining about how hard her life had become without my support. 6 months of watching my twins flourish, without the constant subtle message that they were less valuable than their cousins. 6 months of James and I building a life focused on people who actually loved all 4 of us. Then one evening, James showed me a text he'd received. Your dad wants to meet for coffee. Just the 2 of us. Says he wants to apologize properly. This was new. In 9 years of marriage, my father had never initiated one-on-one time with James. What do you think? I asked. I think it's worth hearing what he has to say. 2 days later, James came home from that coffee meeting with a complicated expression. How did it go? I asked immediately. He apologized. Actually apologized, not just expressed regret that I was offended. For what specifically? For treating me like an outsider. For making assumptions about our children's future. For participating in conversations about whether they belonged in family activities. For everything, really. I studied James's face carefully. Do you believe him? I think he's terrified, James said honestly. They lost the house, Ellie. They're renting a 2-bedroom apartment in North Charleston now. Ashley's working 2 jobs and sold her Jeep. They're learning what their lives look like without your financial support. Good. But I also think he's genuinely reflecting. He asked about Noah's robotics project, specific questions that showed he'd been paying attention to the pictures you post online. He wanted to know about Lily's dance competition coming up. He seemed different. That evening, Mom called. Ellie, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that we're in family counseling. Are you? We're learning about unconscious bias, about how our behavior affected you and the twins. We're trying to understand how we got to this point, how we let prejudice overshadow love. I waited, curious whether this would eventually turn into another request for financial assistance. I don't expect you to forgive us immediately, she continued. But I wanted you to know we're working on becoming the kind of grandparents Noah and Lily deserve, not the grandparents we've been. What does that look like? I asked carefully. It looks like admitting we were wrong. About the barbecues, about the dinner arrangements, about all of it. It looks like learning to confront our own prejudices instead of expecting children to accommodate them. It looks like recognizing that we failed your babies, and we have to do better. For the first time in any of our conversations since this started, she sounded genuine rather than strategic. Mom, I need you to understand something. The money is never coming back. Regardless of what changes you make, I will never again subsidize this family financially. I understand. Do you? Because every previous conversation has eventually turned into a request for assistance. This family has to learn to live within our means, she said firmly. That's our responsibility, not yours. We created this situation by prioritizing comfort over character, and we have to fix it ourselves. It was the first time I'd ever heard her acknowledge that. If you want a relationship with Noah and Lily, I continued, it has to be because you value them, not because you're hoping to eventually restore financial support. I do value them, Ellie. I know it doesn't look that way based on our behavior, but I do. They're my grandchildren, and I failed them. I want the chance to do better. Then show them. Not me them. Be the grandmother they need, not the one you've been. 3 months later, we had our first family dinner in almost a year. Not at their apartment, they didn't have space. At a casual restaurant in Somerville where everyone paid for their own meals. No obligations, no expectations, just a chance to see if anything had actually changed. I watched carefully as my parents interacted with all 4 grandchildren. They asked Noah about his robotics team's recent competition and actually listened to his detailed explanation of how they'd modified their robot's gripper mechanism. They didn't interrupt or change the subject when the explanation went technical. They cheered when Lily described her dance team's upcoming recital and asked specific questions about her solo. They requested details about her costume, her music choice, the choreography she'd helped create. They included both twins equally in conversations and activities. When Grace started talking about her upcoming birthday party, Mom immediately asked Noah and Lily what they'd like to do for their birthday in 2 months. It wasn't perfect. Years of learned behavior don't disappear overnight. I saw Mom catch herself starting to make an excuse about why Noah couldn't join some neighborhood activity, then stop mid-sentence and correct herself, but it was different. Better. More genuine. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Mom pulled me aside. Ellie, I want you to know that losing your financial support was the best thing that could have happened to us. I raised an eyebrow. How do you figure? Because it forced us to examine why we were willing to risk losing you and the twins. It made us realize we'd been prioritizing comfort over family, money over love, convenience over what was right. I looked at her, searching for signs of manipulation or calculation. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. The twins still ask why they don't see you more often, I said carefully. Maybe we could change that, Mom said hopefully. Not big family events right away, just small visits, getting to know them as individuals, learning who they really are instead of making assumptions based on how they look. Maybe, I said. That night, as I drove home with my family, Lily asked the question I'd been both dreading and hoping for. Mama, are Grandma and Grandpa different now? What do you think, sweetheart? I think they're trying to be different. Grandpa asked me about my dance solo and actually remembered which song I'm using. He even asked if he could come watch at the recital. And how does that make you feel? Good, Lily said thoughtfully. Like maybe they want to know us now. Not just see us, but actually know us. From the rearview mirror, I saw Noah nodding in agreement. Grandma asked if I could teach her about robotics. She said she wants to understand what I'm passionate about. James reached over and took my hand. Any regrets about how you handled it? He asked quietly. I thought about the house my parents lost, the financial stress my decisions had caused, the year of estrangement we'd all endured, the hard conversations and painful realizations. Then I thought about my children, who were learning that they didn't have to accept less than they deserved from anyone, including family members who claimed to love them. Who were discovering that their worth wasn't negotiable, that their dignity wasn't optional, that their existence didn't require anyone's approval. None, I said firmly. Not a single one. 3 months after that first dinner, my parents attended Lily's dance recital. They sat in the front row, cheered louder than anyone else, and brought flowers for her afterward. They asked Noah to explain how his robotics team worked, and Dad actually took notes. 6 months later, they came to Noah's robotics competition and stayed the entire day, learning the rules, asking questions, genuinely engaging with something that mattered to their grandson. They never asked for money. Not once. They downsized further, moved to an even smaller apartment they could comfortably afford. Ashley found a better-paying job and learned to budget properly. They all learned to live within their actual means instead of the artificially inflated lifestyle my money had provided. And slowly, carefully, tentatively, we rebuilt a relationship. Not the old relationship where I was an ATM and my children were embarrassing complications, a new relationship where everyone understood their worth and their boundaries. James and I started a college fund with the money we weren't sending to my family anymore. We took the twins on a trip to Disney World. We invested in our future instead of their comfort. And most importantly, Noah and Lily grew up learning that love wasn't conditional on convenience, that respect wasn't negotiable, and that family meant actually valuing each other, not just tolerating each other for financial benefit. 1 year after that awful day when I heard them discussing my children like defective products, we had a real family dinner at our house. Everyone came. My parents brought a dish to share, not expecting us to provide everything. Ashley brought a genuine smile and stories about her new job that she was actually proud of. And for the first time in their lives, my twins sat at a table where everyone treated them as equally valuable, equally loved, equally important. As I watched them laugh with their grandparents, I thought about that woman I'd been a year ago, the one who couldn't see what was happening right in front of her, who enabled bad behavior because she was afraid of losing family connections, who prioritized keeping the peace over protecting her children. That woman was gone, and I didn't miss her at all, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that hurts the people you care about most. Sometimes protecting your family means drawing hard lines and refusing to cross them, even when everyone around you is screaming that you're being unreasonable. Sometimes the people who love you need to lose access to you to understand your value. And sometimes, they actually learn the lesson. Mama, Lily whispered, leaning against me as the dinner wound down, I'm glad we taught them how to love us right. Me too, baby, I said, kissing the top of her head. Me too.